Welcome everybody to page 1's 15 on 15, where we're going to talk about relativity arm files today and kind of cover what they are, how they work, and what you need to know about them when you receive one. An ARM file is basically your relativity workspace all packaged up for migration or for preservation. The ARM stands for Archive, Restore, and Migrate. And basically, unlike a flat file export, an ARM contains all of the audit information, the history of what happened in the database, the files that have been loaded, and all your coding and everything that is associated with the workspace, including applications, custom scripts, and all that stuff. So that can all be packaged up in a relativity ARM file. And an ARM file is specific to relativity, and it's unique in that it contains the entire workspace. So the goal of the ARM is to be able to migrate from one platform to another, or preserve your case and restore it later. ARM contains several different folders and many files, which we'll take a look at here in a little bit. And basically, if you need to restore your ARM for any reason, you can take that ARM package, give it to a relativity host, and restore the entire workspace just like it was when it was decommissioned originally. And an ARM export sometimes comes as a zipped up package, but inside of that zip, or if you get the ARM not zipped up, you will see a folder structure and some files that looks sort of similar to this screenshot here. And we're going to walk through each of those folders and kind of what they do. But this is what you'd expect to see inside of an ARM. Some of the files to kind of call out is these manifest files, which are kind of a log of what was exported and the batches for the exports. The archive information is sort of the roadmap to all of the pieces of the ARM. And of course, the log here is a complete log of all the events to build the ARM. We'll take a look at all of those a little bit more. The archive XML file here contains information about the archive, the settings used to generate the archive, what files were exported, as well as information about the workspace and the original workspace instance. So like where it came from, what kind of version of relativity, all that information is stored in this XML file. And then these 3 CSV files that you get are sort of your exceptions. This will track any files that were flagged as malware on the export. Those files will not be included, but you'll be informed that they were excluded because of malware. Missing files are files that the database used to have, but for whatever reason were deleted. Sometimes that's network systems will delete files with identified as malware, so they'll come through as missing files. Sometimes users delete files, and we still have a file record in relativity, so that will show up there. And then failed to export applications. Sometimes some custom applications, especially that are referring to resources that aren't usually available to relativity, might fail, and basically any applications that fail to export will show up in that log there. And then we have our notes file, which basically just has any custom notes on the workspace. Pretty rarely you'll have any data there. The log file, as I mentioned before, is sort of a log of all of the events to build the ARM file. So this is tracking each step of the export, and then also if it has any issues with any of those steps. The manifest file is an index of each of the export batches to build the ARM. And the top level manifest is an index of the file repository batches. So that's actually the documents and files associated with the workspace coming out, and it's being tracked there, and you can put some metrics and things. And then just a little bit of information about sort of the key file types that make up the information about your ARM. So you have JSON files, which is JavaScript object notation. And JavaScript is commonly used for communication of complex information between computer systems. It is designed to be human readable, and Relativity uses JSON files in its ARM to track its logs and information about what's happening in your ARM. And then XML, sort of a similar idea. Complex objects can be stored within the XML file, and it's used to communicate between machines, but also designed to be human readable as well. And we will take a look at both those files here shortly. And before we take questions, we're going to dive into these files. I went ahead and built an ARM file here from a demo case. And we're taking a look at all of our different folders, and these are the files. So this is kind of what you'd expect to receive if you request a ARM export. And then each of these folders represent sort of the different pieces of the workspace. Audit is the history about the case, so, events that happen, user actions, all of that information. This database one is extra important. That is the actual database from Relativity. And Relativity is built on SQL, Microsoft SQL specifically, and this is a Microsoft SQL database backup file. So that's a standard backup file for SQL. It can actually be restored to any instance of SQL Server. That doesn't mean that your Relativity database is restored, just access to the database itself. Data grid is information about things stored in the data grid, commonly your extracted text. Any long text fields can be stored there. DT search indexes can be exported. Doesn't always make sense to export your indexes with your ARM just because you'll build fresh indexes once you restore it. The extension data here, this is any custom scripts, applications, or resource files. Resource files are often associated with event handlers. So if you have event handlers in your workspace, if you have any applications, you are going to get the Relativity application package or wrap file for each of those included in your ARM. So when it restores, it'll go right back where it was. And then similar with admin scripts, if you have any custom scripts associated with the workspace, they would show up there. Those are just standard Relativity scripts. Invariant, this is your processing information. So if you're processing into the workspace, Relativity will back up all of the processing information here. You'll notice we've got another BAK file. This is again a Microsoft SQL database backup, and that is for the processing database. And this is also stores your deduplication tables. So this is important if you want to be able to process new data into a restored workspace. You want to make sure and ask for the processing to be included in your ARM so that you can have your dedupe tables come back up. These manifests are just sort of the different manifest files for each of the file exports, and we're going to take a look at those a little bit more in the non-repository files and repository files. And again, these are sort of key folders. This is the repository is your main document file store. So inside of here, you're going to find subfolders for each of the batches for the export. And then we'll also find the files themselves. So if we get into these here. So here is the actual documents associated with the database. You'll notice that they do not have a file extension and that they do not have a file name, either representative of a control number or the original file name that the file had when it was processed in. That's because Relativity assigns these GUIDs as a unique identifier to every file, and then they're stored with their GUIDs. So one thing to check is that once you receive an ARM and have made a copy of it to whatever media or place that you're going to store it, you might verify that your file counts match with the expected files from the ARM. I'll show you how to do that here in a moment. And then Review Center, this folder is going to contain any information about the Review Center data generated. So if you're using the priority review and stuff like that, your models will be stored there. All right. I'm going to take a quick dive into a couple of these important files. So the first one we're going to look at is this log file. And this is all the events that were used to build the ARM itself. This big text file. Each of these lines, though, is actually JSON, which we talked about earlier. And I went ahead and put together a little, this is a one-liner PowerShell just to convert our JSON so we can look at it. And so in our records here, we can see we have 770 events that the log is tracking. And each one of these events, if we were to open it up, this is what the JSON looks like once you sort of deserialize it. And we can see each of the events, and then it has information about what was actually happening for that event, what steps have been taken, and then whether it was executed, and if it had any exceptions. So the exceptions are basically when you have errors in your process. And oftentimes we'll look at this to verify that the ARM was created successfully, especially the last record, which I have here. If we look at the properties of the last record, we're looking that the job state is complete and that the ARM reported no exceptions here. But that's just kind of what digging into the JSON looks like. If we look at these manifests, excuse me. So let's see. Top level manifest, this is sort of our folders for our file exports. And so we can see here, this is the JSON. We read it in, and we can see each folder as it was created, file count that it expects, the total size of each folder. So these correspond with our repository files here. So if we look in this one, dig into here, and we were to take the properties off of this, we'd see that our file count corresponds. And so this is a good way to take a look and make sure that you're getting the number of files out you expected, but it's a little tedious because it's going folder by folder. And if we look at this guy here, this is our archive information XML. And by the way, I'm using Visual Studio Code. It's a Microsoft free software to look at all these files. This is our XML here. I'm just going to go ahead and fold this. So this is basically, you can see the hierarchy of the XML. So this is all the different sections of information that we're tracking. So we can see, case information, the client, the matter, information as from the database. We can see basically the analytics were included, database encryption turned on or off, all this information here. We see users in the database, workspace history there, if we're including what pieces we're including in the archive. But the important one that I usually check to make sure that I've copied an ARM correctly is we're going to look at the file repositories. Collapse this a little bit. And we go down here. Under file repositories here, we can see we've got some numbers and sizes, and we can actually expand this. Here we go. We see we have 470 files in our count. We see our total size there in kilobytes. we have 91 files in our non-repository folder. And this is a little confusing because these numbers subtract from each other. So if we look at this, see in our repository files, we get our total file count here, 379. And then if we look at our non-repository, we'll see that we have 91. So the number that's represented in our XML file here is the combination of those two. So that's your total file count across both folders. So I usually verify that to make sure that when I've copied an ARM, that we've got all of the files associated with it. And then again, you want to double check to make sure you get both of your BAK files. Well, specifically the BAK file from the database here. That is the most important one because that's your main database. And then if you've included processing, then you look for your invariant database BAK file here. I would verify that you've got, all of the pieces of the ARM. Usually what we see is in copy and ARM. Sometimes we lose files, especially from these repository folders. So it's good practice to double check those or whatever archive media you're using. That sort of covers everything we're looking at for ARMS today. And we can go ahead and take any questions. If we were running behind, maybe. Questions yet? All right, if we don't have any questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up today. Thank you for everybody for coming out. And if you need to reach out to page 1, contact information is up here. Page